Okay, so here are the answers for the learning target number 1 practice for chapter 3. Let me go through these and then I'll talk to you about them a little bit. Okay, so the most important thing about this learning target number 1 is that you know this, right? When you are taking square roots, the square root of a positive number has 2 answers, right? Like the square root of 25 equals 5 or negative 5, 2 answers. But negative numbers do not have square roots. Like the square root of negative 9 equals, well, there's no solution to that. That is the biggest reason people do not master this section, is getting the wrong number of answers on each problem. When you go to cube roots, right, all numbers have 1 cube root. If the number is positive, the cube root is positive. If the number is negative, the cube root is negative. Oops. There we go. Okay. Again, the number of answers seems to be the number 1 reason people get this section wrong. Let me go through the problems, and I'm going to need my calculator probably. All right, so number 1 is the square root of a negative number. There are no square roots of negative numbers. That is no solution. Number 2 is the cube root of negative 216. So I type that into my calculator and I find out it's negative 6. Number 3, the square root of 800. So this time I do the square root and I find out it's 28.3. Okay, the second reason that people miss these is they don't round well. These would be my answers. Notice that I'm rounding to 1 decimal place, and when you round to 1 decimal place, you look at the next number, and it tells you whether to round the 2 up or keep it the same. An 8 would cause me to round the 2 up to a 3. Number 3, the cube root of 64. I type that in, I find out it's 4. Number 5, the cube root of negative 100. So I would type in the cube root of negative 100, and I would find out it's negative 4.6. And last up, the square root of 729. And the square root of 729 is 27, or negative 27. Your calculator is not going to tell you there's 2 answers. You've got to know it. All right, the square root of a fraction. You know, if you're using this calculator, you could just type in the square root of the fraction. It would give it to you. Or you could just take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom, and that would be your answer as well. Of course, there's 2 answers. It'd be 6/11 or negative 6/11. And the same thing works with cube roots. You could just type in the cube root of the fraction on this calculator, if you know how to type that in. Or you could type in the cube root of 8 and the cube root of 343 separately, and you'd find out it's 2/7. And that takes us to the solving equations, which is still finding square roots and cube roots. Here I would take the square root of both sides, and I would find out that x equals 14 or negative 14, because square roots have 2 answers. Here I'm cubing the x, so to get rid of the cube I need to take the cube root of both sides, and that gives me 6. Here I'm squaring the n, so to get rid of the square I need to do the square root, and the square root of 72 is 8.5. So it'd be 8.5 or negative 8.5. Number 12, again, I'm squaring the c. So to get rid of the square, I need to take the square root of both sides. And I would find out that typing that into my calculator, I get 6/7 or -6/7. All right, number 13 takes about 3 steps, right? To get the x by itself, there are 3 numbers to get rid of: the 11, the 2, and the 7. And you get rid of them in reverse order of PEMDAS, SADMEP. So first I would get rid of the 11 by subtracting 11 from both sides. That gives me 7x squared equals 252. Then I would divide both sides by 7 to get rid of the 7. That gives me x squared equals 36. And then I would get rid of the square by taking the square root of both sides. Then I would get x equals 6 or -6 because square roots have 2 answers. Number 14, I just need to get rid of the cube. I get rid of a cube by taking the cube root of both sides. And the cube root of 150 is, the cube root of 150 is 5.3. Last up, number 15. It's very much like number 13 was above it. You've got 3 numbers to get rid of, and you've got to get rid of them in the correct order. Right? The correct order means the opposite order of operations, not PEMDAS, SADMEP. So you get rid of the subtraction first by adding 1 to both sides. That would give you 2n to the third equals 54. Then you would get rid of the multiplying by 2 by dividing by 2. That gives you n cubed equals 27. And finally, you'd get rid of the cube by taking the cube root of both sides. And the cube root of 27 is 3. And you get n equals 3. All right, I hope that helps. Good luck on the test.